Greetings and salutations, fellow pilots. This is Akirishin. In this video, I will be featuring the Yakovlev Yak 3 Russian fighter. A very nimble, agile fighter with good gun armaments. But before we get into that, I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you what for me is a great accomplishment for the channel, and that is that we have now surpassed 200 subscribers. Now, of course, you know there are lots of YouTubers out there with tremendous subscriber numbers, and so we kind of pale in comparison to that. Certainly understand that. But in a relatively short period of time, we have gotten over 200 subscribers. And I'm really super excited about that. And I just wanted to take the time to thank you all for becoming subscribers. If you're not a subscriber and you're watching this video, I hope you will consider becoming one. It certainly means a lot to me and is tremendously appreciated. And I just wanted to express that thanks to you all for helping to grow this channel. And I really enjoy, in game when people let me know they enjoy my videos. That certainly feels good. It's a great reward for what I do. So anyway, again, thank you, and let's get to the Yakovlev Yak 3. So in terms of gun armaments, it has a 23mm cannon that does 125 damage per second with a pretty good rate of fire for cannons of 420 rounds per minute, and a very decent effective firing range for a Tier 7 of 740 meters. It is also equipped with two 20mm cannons that do 95 damage each with a rate of fire of 420 rounds per minute and an effective firing range of 700 meters. Now, the Yak 3 has good airspeed and boost. I certainly wouldn't describe it as having a good boost. It's only a 6-second boost, which is pretty much Japanese fighter level boost, which is not very impressive. So the airspeed is pretty good. To accentuate that particular strength of this aircraft, I have selected as an upgrade Engine Tuning 3, which increases our engine power by 5%. That helps us to maintain our speed in turns and in climbs, so we don't have as much speed bleeding off in those sorts of maneuvers. I've also equipped Aircraft Polish 2, which increases our airspeed an additional 5%. And to try to get that 6-second boost back up as soon as possible, I have equipped Improved Radiator 3, which 30% to engine cooling speed when engine is idle. To be honest with you, I have not seen a huge difference being made by that. And that being the case, I would suggest maybe going instead with Improved Covering 3 instead of the Improved Radiator. But the combat that you're going to see will involve Improved Radiator. But I would suggest maybe going with Improved Covering to beef up this aircraft's survivability a bit. In terms of pilot skills and upgrades, one of the things that's really nice about this aircraft and aircraft like it is that it has very high maneuverability in horizontal turns. And what's freeing about that is that you don't need the sorts of maneuverability upgrades and pilot skills that you might need on a less maneuverable aircraft. So you, instead of going with, for example, with upgrades of lightweight airframe 3 and control surface adjustment 3 as I would for a less maneuverable aircraft, I can put more into our engines because the maneuverability is already there. And likewise with pilot skills, instead of going with, for example, Aerobatics Expert, I didn't need that skill, and I could put my skill points into Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2, which collectively increase our engine thrust by 5% and our top speed by 2%. I did go with Aerodynamics Expert because it accentuates the effects of our aircraft polish and our engine tuning by 40%. So good synergy there between our pilot skills and our upgrades, which I think is really important. So you get the most bang for your buck with your pilot skills and your upgrades. Another issue is that, and I do this often, is I choose fire resistance. And the reason I do that is that on our consumables, instead of using a consumable for fire extinguisher, I can put it into one of the other important consumables, mainly first aid kit. If I needed to deal with the fire as much, I wouldn't be able to. I'd have to choose really between, for example, first aid kit and control surface auto trim. But by equipping that fire skill on our pilot, I feel like I can get away with not getting fire extinguisher as a consumable. But in terms of consumables, I have automatic engine restarter. We want to, of course, maintain our maneuverability. We can't do that if our engine's knocked out. First aid kit, because it's just horrible when your pilot gets injured and you can't hit anything with your cannons, and you really want to finish off that other fighter. And then finally, control surface auto trim, so that if we have wings or tails damaged, we get them back into controllability. Of course, those are gold consumables that have 60-second cooldowns and activate automatically, versus the non-gold that have 90-second cooldowns and activate manually. In terms of ammunition, I went with universal ammunition. In terms of our 23 millimeter, it has equal parts chance of fire and critical damage. In terms of our 220 millimeters, also equal parts chance of fire and critical damage. In terms of the aircraft specifications, get these all expanded here for you. Optimum altitude is only 1100 meters. So this is this aircraft's weakness. It is a low altitude performer. So if you need to get up there to deal with higher altitude aircraft, you're going to have a really tough time. Although with our engine grade upgrades, it does help with that. But you're still going to have a problem at high altitude. 1100 meters is really low. So that's the aircraft's great weakness, I would say. And that can really be a problem, for example, if, let's say, you get down to the end, towards the end of a match, and all the aircraft are destroyed except maybe RB, 17, and you can't get up there to knock it out. So that's where you can really run into problems with this low altitude fighter. Stall speed is 110 kilometers per hour, not too bad. Optimum airspeed 336 kilometers per hour. Average time to turn 360 degrees, 8 seconds, so that's excellent. A Japanese fighter level there. Top speed at best altitude 700 kilometers per hour. It's got a good dive speed of 780 kilometers per hour. So again, it's just mainly that low altitude that is kind of the problem in terms of its specifications. Looking at our paint schemes, this is marine here that you're looking at now, desert, winter, and summer. Alright, so there is my build for the Yak 3 and its specifications. Let's now compare it to other Tier 7 fighters. Okay, so I have put together a chart that compares the Yak 3 to its Tier 7 fighter peers. And this, I think, will help kind of put things in perspective across the various different aircraft. What I have done here is I have focused on 5 critical metrics for aircraft, that being armaments. And when I look at armaments, I am looking at the total potential damage that all the armaments can bring if all were to strike a target at the same time. Time to turn 360 degrees, hit points, altitude, and speed. So obviously there are other metrics, but those are the ones that I find to be most critical. So looking at these various different metrics across the aircraft, first of all, let's take a look at armaments. And what we see here is that certainly there are many aircraft that can outgun the Yak 3. The Yak 3 comes in at 315 collective damage per second. P-51K is just slightly behind that. Spitfire certainly, but the Spitfire, the Meteor, the Ki-84, the A-7M, the MiG I-220, the Kostakov 302, LA-7, Yak 3rd, all outgun the Yak 3. Not that the Yak 3's gun armaments are bad, but all of those other aircraft that I just named there, as you can see, will outgun the Yak 3 in the gun armaments category. Next, if we look at, and this is probably the most important stat for the Yak 3. While it may have lower damage output than many of the other fighters at this tier, it is unparalleled in terms of being a dogfighter. And you see here that only the A7M can stack up evenly with the Yak 3 in terms of time to turn 360 degrees. And that can be critically important because regardless of how much these other aircraft may be able to outgun the Yak 3, if they can't get their guns on the Yak 3, it doesn't matter. And so if you're in a Yak 3, your strategy is to try to get as close in to these other aircraft as possible so as to be able to outturn, outmaneuver, and have your guns on those other aircraft while they cannot get their guns on you. And if you even look at the Spitfire, you know, at 8.6 or the Ki-84 at 8.6, you know, obviously those are very close stats to the Yak 3, but a 0.6 difference can, over time during a turning dogfight, make the difference between winning that fight or losing that fight. So that's where the Yak 3 excels above all other areas of its specifications. If we look at hit points, the Yak 3 has one of the lower hit points among all of these aircraft. None of them are hugely more survivable than the Yak 3, save maybe the LA-9RD, but they all are kind of, within 20 or so hit points of each other, mostly. So I don't think the Yak 3 suffers too greatly in the survivability department as compared to these other Tier 7 fighters. Now, and this is the Yak 3's greatest weakness, and that is when it comes to altitude. And as you can see, with the A7M, it is the lowest in terms of altitude, and that can be a serious problem, because many times the higher altitude aircraft can pick their moment of attack, and and you're in your Yak 3, you're going along, you're duking it out down there at the lower altitude, and next thing you know, one of these other fighters is jumping on top of you from above, and you just don't see it coming. So, it can be a significant issue. Also, as we get towards the end of a battle, sometimes there may be only one or two enemy aircraft left, and if you're able to shoot down those aircraft, you can win the match. But if you can't get to them because they're up, at 2,200 meters and above, and you're stalling out in your Yak 3 because, your optimum altitude is 1,100 meters, it could mean the difference between winning or losing the match. And I've seen that happen, for example, when there's an RB-17 up there as the last remaining aircraft. I've had that happen to me several times, and you just can't get to it, and it's very frustrating. So you've got to rely upon bots to get up there many times and get that high altitude aircraft. And of course, counting on a bot is fraught with peril. Now, the other major component is, of course, speed. And in terms of speed, as you can see, the Yak 3 is not that bad in comparison to these other fighters. You've got the Kostakov 302 that's there at 820 kilometers per hour. That's you've got the 760 kilometers per hour with the Yak 3. In terms of speed, Yak 3 hangs right in there with these other aircraft. And again, when we're looking at speed here, we're looking at the best speed at its ideal altitude. That's what I measured here. I chose not to go with optimum airspeed just because, I'd rather compare in terms of, how fast can these aircraft go when they're in their element, their ideal element. I think that's a pretty good stat for the Yak 3 when you consider how maneuverable it is. One observation before we conclude here with the aircraft comparison, and that is, if you're looking for a viable alternative to the Yak 3, so if you like the Yak 3's maneuverability, if that's your big thing, as to why you like the Yak 3, but you don't like its armaments and you don't like its low altitude performance, you may want to consider the Kai 84 as a very viable alternative to the Yak 3. So when you look at the Ki-84, it has it can do 470 collective damage per second as compared to the Yak-3's 315 damage per second. So that's a pretty significant advantage that the Ki-84 has over the Yak-3. The hit points for the Ki-84 and the Yak-3 are the same, so you don't have any, loss there between the two aircraft. But you do have a slight disadvantage in terms of best speed at optimum altitude of 50 kilometers per hour with the Ki-84 as compared to the Yak-3. So the Yak-3 has 700 kilometers per hour, whereas the Ki-84 only has 650 kilometers per hour. But that's only 50 kilometers per hour. It's not a huge difference between the two. In contrast, the Ki-84 has an optimum altitude of 1,800 meters, 700 meters more than the Yak-3. So with the Ki-84, you get significantly increased armament damage output, significant increase in optimum altitude at only the cost of 0.6 maneuverability as compared to the Yak-3. Yak-3, 8 seconds on the turn, Ki-84, 8.6 seconds. So only a 0.6 second disadvantage to the Ki-84, and only a 50 kilometer per hour disadvantage to the Ki-84 in terms of airspeed. So that's not a bad trade. That 0.6 seconds, while, as I mentioned before, it could make the difference if you get in one of those round and round and round turning dogfights. Eventually a 0.6 difference is going to matter. But many times you can avoid getting in that situation if you just use good strategy to where that 0.6 won't matter as compared to the advantages of the higher altitude and the 470 damage per second output of the Ki-84. So definitely the Ki-84 is a very viable alternative to the Yak-3. But if you want to go the best in terms of turning time, it is the Yak-3 still. So anyway, I hope this is kind of a new format for me doing this, and it is a good bit of work for me to put this together. But I'm hoping that it maybe helps you see these various different aircraft in visually a little bit better. So let me know your thoughts in your comments to this video, what you thought of this this new format for comparing the various different aircraft. So I hope that helps put the Yak-3 in context with its Tier 7 peers. Okay, so having gone over my build for this aircraft, having discussed its specifications, and having compared it to other Tier 7 fighters, let's head into a battle now and see the Yak-3 in action, the little Russian dynamo. Alright, so we will be fighting in our little Yak-3 over the Alpine Gamut Collision Theater of Operation. We'll head first to the garrison, and then from there on to the garrison to the east of the map.
Attention! You are entering the combat zone. Get ready for battle. Good luck. me what you can do, pilots.
All
Let's
right,
roll.
and off we go. Alright, we've got a 6-second boost, which is, you know, pretty much Japanese fighter level of boost. Head up here and on this mid-altitude heavy fighter. Doing short bursts so we don't get our guns too overheated. These heavy fighters, you gotta lead them a little bit more just because they're so much faster. And this heavy fighter is working against our teammate there. All right. And certainly, you know, shooting down the fighters is a lot easier and faster. There we go, and looks like we have an enemy fighter here, a P-51. And we're a little bit in its element here, so do have to be careful. But it's got machine guns and we have cannons. Gotcha. So we'll head down here and get a little bit more in our element. This is, of course, you know, as we talked about earlier, a low altitude fighter. And let's see if we can't wrestle away their garrison over here. Down. Yeah, see, there's a good example where you really have to lead these darn heavy fighters a little bit more. You're gonna miss. Oh, looks like we have an enemy fighter coming in here. Where'd he go? Got a fighter coming in behind us here. Probably an air defense aircraft. There's our P-51 back.
Enemy object damaged.
And we're going to do to it what we did before. go. Alright, got some more another enemy fighter here, an I-220. But I would like to finish off this garrison, so we'll head over here and try to take out a couple more of these defense aircraft. Fighter up there we need to be concerned about. So I'm kind of watching the mini-map, keeping an eye on the mini-map. Make sure that fighter doesn't sneak up on me. And there we have one coming in, I can see. Multi-roll. P-47. Alright. So things are going pretty well here. We've got something moving in over here. What is that? Okay, we've got a Yak 3, another Yak 3. And we got the better of that exchange, fortunately. Sorry, shot down our own plane there.
Receiving reports about rapidly deteriorating weather conditions. Support will be unable to reach you. Do you read me? Over.
Okay, so we'll head on here. Something's going on at the military base. So we'll head over here and see if we can figure out that. And we've got ground attack aircraft. I saw a multi-roll coming in over there where we just were. My guess is that it's that P-47 coming back. But we need to deal with this ground attack aircraft here first. So I'm more worried about it than I am a P-47.
We cannot support you any longer. The storm is too heavy. Do you copy?
There we go.
Over.
And let's see what's going on up here. Some high altitude. So I think we're okay here. So I'm going to head over here and see what's going on with our garrison. Looks like the enemy is kind of concentrating on it right now. And we've got the squall line.
Way to go! Victory is
So we
close.
definitely need to be concerned about that. Hate to get knocked out at this point. So we're going to be watching the mini-map pretty closely here. Let's go down here and deal with this IL-20 human ground attack pilot. What I don't want to have happen here
Air
is
supremacy achieved.
us end up getting killed with a bomb at this point. When he's turned like that though, he's not going to be dropping a bomb. He might be dropping one now.
Victory is ours. We're waiting for your return.
Okay, so victory and rank 1 on the team. And let's see here, subjugator, effective fire, and flying start. So let's head back to the hangar and see what the after action report says overall. Okay, so 8 kills, 3 assists there. Did over 3,800 in damage to aerial targets. And let's see here. Over 7,900 in combat points. And let's see here. About 55,000 in change, 4,600 in experience, 232 in free experience. And we got through that entire combat without being destroyed once. In fact, I don't even remember taking that much fire. Captured 2 sectors. So a good result there for the Yak 3. I really like this aircraft. It's very maneuverable. With our engine upgrades, it can, do decently getting up there in altitude. Overall, great performance for this aircraft. Alright, so I hope that you've really enjoyed this video. And if you get an opportunity to fly the Yak 3, I hope you have great success in it.